Ba 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 ba. Bum 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 bum. Yeah, here we are. What? Yeah. Welcome to the Canadian Commie. For those of you who are just listening in, I am streaming on YouTube. Over at, if you want to join in the conversation, over at www.thecanadiancommie.com. I will be talking to the live chat as they come on in. And of course, over on Twitch, I'll be talking to people as they come on in, reading their comments, responding to their comments. Again, if you'd like to participate and join in on that, please come on in to www.thecanadiancommie.com, where we comment on the decline of Western civilization and, in fact, perhaps the entire human species. XD, good to see you, my friend. Azron writes, jacking in to the mainframe. You've broken out of the Matrix. It's such a shame that the worst people in the conversation kind of hijacked the whole Matrix kind of thing, right? That it's Andrew Tate and his group of total losers. It's been pointed out that we really do live in a period of, like, super villainy. That you have, like, complete and total clowns, absolute jackanapes, people who have no business whatsoever being taken seriously in the culture, and yet they're at the highest possible level. Peanut Butter Beatrice, good to see you. Good to see you, guys. So I'm just going to jump in to the first couple of articles, because, you know, we like to keep things light, right? We're going to start with some light reading. Anemone, an absolute pleasure to see you, Anemone. Hope you're doing well out there in the world. So we have read here on the Canadian Commie before that microplastics have been found in our testicles, but now, according to The Guardian, microplastics are infiltrating brain tissue. Studies show there's nowhere left untouched. Kind of explains what we're experiencing, right? Not only is there lead in our bloodstreams, now we're finding microplastics in our brains. 24 brain samples collected in early 2024 measured on average about 0.5% plastic by weight. Congratulations, guys. Your brain is 0.5% plastic. A growing body of scientific evidence shows that microplastics are accumulating in critical human organs, including the brain, leading researchers to call for more urgent actions to rein in plastic pollution. Studies have detected tiny shards and specks of plastics in human lungs, placentas, reproductive organs, livers, kidneys, knee and elbow joints, blood vessels, and bone marrow. Given the research findings, it is now imperative to declare a global emergency to deal with plastic pollution, said Sedat Gundagdu, who studies microplastics at Kirkova. Hold on, I'm going to get this one right. Kirkorova. I did it. Kirkorova University in Turkey. Humans are exposed to microplastics defined as fragments smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter, and the chemicals used to make plastics from widespread plastic pollution in air, water, and even food. The health hazards of microplastics within the human body are not yet well known. Recent studies are just beginning to suggest they could increase the risk of various conditions such as oxidative stress, which can lead to cell damage and inflammation, as well as cardiovascular disease. Animal studies have also linked microplastics to fertility issues, various cancers, a disrupted endocrine and immune system, and impaired learning and memory. There are currently no governmental standards for plastic particles in food or water in the United States. The Environmental Protection Agency is working on crafting guidelines for measuring them and has been giving out grants since 2018 to develop new ways to quickly detect and quantify them. Finding microplastics in more and more human organs raises a lot of concerns. Given what we know about health effects in animals, studies of human cells in the lab, and emerging epidemiological studies, says Bethany Carney Almroth, an ecotoxicologist at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. It's scary, I'd say. Yeah, who knew that surrounding all our food and all of our water and all products that we consume in a thin layer of plastic was going to result in some kind of merger between plastic and man. Who knew? I feel like we're gonna look back on this era and just be like, you guys were wrapping your food in plastic? What are you, stupid? And we're like, yeah, yes, we are. We're deeply, deeply stupid. Pretty alarming. In one of the latest studies to emerge, a preprint paper still undergoing peer review that is posted online by the National Institutes of Health, researchers found a partially concerning accumulation of microplastics in brain samples. An examination of the livers, kidneys, and brains of autopsied bodies found that all contained microplastics, but the 91 brain samples contained on average about 10 to 20 times more than other organs. The results came as a shock, according to the study's lead author, Matthew Campen, a toxicologist and professor of pharmaceutical studies at the University of New Mexico. The researchers found that 24 of the brain samples, which were collected in early 2024, measured on average about 0.5% plastic by weight. That's pretty alarming, Campen said. There's much more plastic in our brains than I would have ever imagined or been comfortable with. The study describes the brain as one of the most plastic-polluted tissues yet sampled. It's explaining a lot, you guys, right? It's explaining a lot, right? Joe, good to see you. CH, Conton, Nilo, Timothy, good to see you guys. Good to see you guys. The preprint brain study led by Campen also hinted at a concerning link. In the study, researchers looked at 12 brain samples from people who had died with dementia, including Alzheimer's disease. These brains contained up to 10 times more plastic by weight than healthy samples. I don't know how much more plastic our brains can stuff in without it causing some problems, Campen said. The paper was also found the quantity of microplastics in brain samples from 2024 was about 50% higher than from total in samples that date to 2016, suggesting the concentration of microplastics found in human brains is rising at a similar rate to that found in the environment. Most of the organs came from the offices of the medical investigator of Albuquerque, New Mexico, which investigates untimely or violent deaths. You can draw a line. It's increasing over time. It's consistent with what you're seeing in the environment, Campen said. Many other papers have found microplastics in the brains of other animal species, so it's not entirely surprising the same could be true for humans, said Almroth of the University of Gothenburg, who was not involved in the paper. When it comes to these insidious particles, the blood-brain barrier is not as protective as we'd like to think, Almroth said, referring to the series of membranes that keep many chemicals and pathogens from reaching the central nervous system. Explosion of research. Adding to the concerns about the accumulation in the human body, the Journal of Hazardous Materials published a study last month that found microplastics in all 16 samples of bone marrow examined, the first paper of its kind. All the samples contained polystyrene, used to make packing for peanuts and electronics, and almost all contained polyethylene, used in clear food wrap, detergent bottles, and other common household products. Another recent paper looked at 45 patients undergoing hip or knee surgery in Beijing, China. found microplastics in the membrane lining of every single hip or knee joint examined. A study published on the 15th of May in the Journal of Toxicological Sciences found microplastics in all 23 human and 47 canine testicles studied, finding that samples from people had a nearly threefold greater concentration than those from dogs. A higher quantity of certain type of plastic particles, including polyethylene, is the main component of plastic water bottles, correlated with lower testicular weight in dogs. Another paper, which appeared on the 19th of June in the International Journal of Impotence Research, detected plastic particles in the penises of 4 out of 5 men getting penile implants to treat erectile dysfunction. The potential health effects are concerning, especially considering the unknown long-term consequences of microplastics accumulating in sensitive tissues like the reproductive organs, said Ranjith Ramasamy, the study's lead author and medical researcher and urologist at the University of Miami. Meanwhile, a Chinese group published a study in May showing small quantities of microplastics in the semen of all 40 participants. An Italian paper from a few months prior reported similar results. A handful of studies have now also found contamination in human placentas. A study that appeared in the May issue of Toxicological Sciences reported finding micro and nanoplastics in all 62 placental samples, though the concentration ranged widely. In Italy, researchers followed 312 patients who had fatty deposits or plaques removed from their carotid artery. Almost 6 in 10 had microplastics, and these people fared worse than those who did not. Over the next 34 months, they were 2.1 times as likely to experience a heart attack or stroke or die. Nowhere left untouched. The Food and Drug Administration says in a statement on its website that current scientific evidence does not demonstrate that levels of microplastics or nanoplastics detected in food pose a risk to human health. Still, researchers say that individuals should try to reduce their exposure by avoiding the use of plastics in prepared food, especially when microwaving, drinking tap water instead of bottled water, and trying to prevent the accumulation of dust, which is contaminated with plastics. Some researchers advise eating less meat, especially processed products. Leonardo Trascende, a medical researcher at the New York University, said much remains unknown about the impacts of microplastic accumulation in humans. The negative health impacts of chemicals used in plastics, such as phthalates, are better established, though, he said. A study he co-authored found exposure to phthalates had increased the risk of cardiovascular disease and death in the United States, causing $39 billion or more in lost productivity per year. Microplastic particles can be contaminated with and carry such chemicals into the body. The micro and nanoplastics may be effective delivery systems for toxic chemicals, Trasande said. The American Chemistry Council, which represents plastic and chemical manufacturers, did not directly respond to questions about the recent studies finding microplastic in human organs. Kimberly Wise-White, a vice president with the group, noted that the global plastics industry is dedicated to advancing the scientific understanding of microplastics. The United Nations Environment Assembly agreed 2 years ago to begin working towards a global treaty to end plastic pollution, a process that is ongoing. The several news reports in the last week suggest that the Biden administration has signaled that the U.S. delegation involved in the discussions will support measures to reduce global production of plastics, which researchers say is critical to getting a handle on the problem. There's nowhere left untouched, from the deep sea to the atmosphere to the human brain, Almroth said. We're so fucked. We're so fucked. Yeah, Jeff, plastic in my balls. What are you making the song, John? I got plastic in my balls. I got plastic in my balls. Ring the bells up in the halls, 'cause I got plastic in my balls. Really just waiting for inspiration on that one. We're like so fucked as a species, right? We're gonna like the kids that we do have are gonna be just afflicted with this shit. We're just gonna have generations and generations of progressively stupider children. It's just what's gonna happen. Like, just more evidence that the correct thing to do is not have kids. AMD Ryzen 5 5600K, or X rather. Dude, what is with your name? Good to see you. I'm going to call you Ryzen. Ryzen writes, you should do a political compass test. I have. Communist. We did it. It's what is it? It's like socially liberal, economically liberal, right? Like, I'm on the left, my man. Peanut Butter Beatrice, I heard millennials and Gen Z have higher rates of cancer. For sure. Yeah, for sure, man. Like, no. Like, we're screwed, right? Like, I don't see any reason but to just get into, like, a pretty healthy... Like, just live your life, right? Just live your life. Just, like, do what you can to mitigate whatever you can. But just, like... Boy, howdy. Nilo asks the question, right? Does too much of a focus on this kind of thing result in a bit of political nihilism? No revolutionary optimism is the message. We're screwed. I mean, we have to face reality. Like, that's the truth, right? Like, we are here specifically to take a hammer to the delusions that exist in our society, of which there are many, and to hammer them apart, right? That the Democrats are not going to help us. The Republicans are not going to help us. It's not nihilistic to say what reality actually is, right? The strategy, right, the reason why we want to do this is so that we can be honest with one another and so that we can actually talk openly with one another. And you are seeing, and we are seeing, an opening up of the discourse, right? Where people are beginning. You are seeing more serious voices. You are seeing more and more people coming to the fore and finally acknowledging and saying out loud, yeah, we've got a problem. We got a real problem, an actual serious problem. You are seeing more and more voices coming into the discourse and more people beginning to confront the problems actually seriously. The solution that the capitalists are going to try to funnel that energy into is, of course, just meager reformism. 0.25% over 20 years. That's what they want. If they can secure your vote, or if they can secure your support, or if they can get you to continue buying into the system by just offering you basically nothing, just enough to make it to the end of their term so that their opponent can come in and overturn it, then they will, right? Then they will. And so I am here to remind people, hey, there's an alternative path. There's this whole other path that we could explore, right? And that we should explore. And we should take seriously. And it doesn't have anything to do with voting. Like, go vote. Like, knock yourself out, right? There's this entire other alternative path. Long Defiant, good to see you. Would you describe most communist movements as culturally conservative? No. I don't think a culturally conservative communist movement can be successful. It's the reason why the mega communist movement is destined for failure. Communist movements have traditionally been on the left. Like, are there aspects of communist movements of the past that we would currently describe as conservative? Sure. But it's been 100 years, right? That communist movements in their own day were further to the left than the society was of that day, right? Like, we have direct statements from Mao, for example. I think Mao is the clearest example of this, where women hold up half the sky, right? Like, I can't think of a more pro-feminist, pro-women position than to say women hold up half the sky. Like, that's a statement of equality, right? And certainly a far cry from what was happening to women previously, which is indentured servitude and slavery, right? So I think that communist movements, that if you are looking at someone who is essentially saying, I want economic liberty, but I'm going to remain culturally on the right, then you're essentially looking at somebody who just wants to be the slave owner. That's all. That they just want liberty for themselves, and they're fine with the indentured servitude and slavery of the lesser races, right? Like this sort of very deeply unserious MAGA communist position. Like, big shock, guys who call themselves patriotic socialists, literally one hair's breadth statement away from national socialists, end up being national socialists, and whatever that means. So, continuing the laugh riot that we're all going through. So, we all got plastic in our brains. So let's take our plastic-addled brains and now focus on who our chilling new masters are going to be into the new era of artificial intelligence. Yesterday we read an article that was straight out about how current workers are being told to essentially train AI to replace them. And from Business Insider, in a leaked recording, Amazon Cloud Chief tells employees that most developers could stop coding soon as AI takes over. Like, won't it be great when coding is just a lost art? When we just don't know how to do it anymore? We just have a robot do it for us? Software engineers may have to develop other skills soon as artificial intelligence takes over many coding tasks. That's according to Amazon Web Services CEO Matt Garman, who shared his thoughts on the topic during an internal fireside chat held in June, according to a recording of the meeting obtained by Business Insider. If you go forward 24 months from now, or some amount of time, I can't exactly predict where it is, it's possible that most developers are not coding, said Garman, who became AWS's CEO in June. Coding is just kind of like the language that we talk to computers. It's not necessarily the skill in and of itself, the executive said. The skill in and of itself is like, how do I innovate? How do I build something that's interesting for my end users to use? It's always about innovate, right? So it's never about accessibility, right? It's never about how we ensure that most people have access to the thing, right? It's always about how do we innovate so the one guy with money likes it. This means the job of the software developer will change, Garman said. It just means that each of us has to get more in tune with what our customers need, customers being the 5 people with money, and what the actual end thing is that we're going to try to go build. Because that's going to be more and more of what the work is, as opposed to sitting down and actually writing code. Yeah, computer programs for the future, ideas, right? Where are the vulnerable children in my neighborhood? There's an app that someone like Jeff Bezos or Donald Trump would really find useful, right? Where are the vulnerable children in my neighborhood that I can easily exploit for my sexual gratification, right? These are the kinds of apps that we need to create in order to sell to the 5 guys with money. No dire warning. Talk of AI changing or even eliminating jobs has intensified lately as companies lay off employees or stop hiring to shift resources towards AI development. New AI tools that automatically generate code can help companies do more with the same number of engineers and fewer of these pricey employees. AWS laid off hundreds of employees earlier this year. No sign that capitalism's grinding to a halt, guys. No sign. Who's going to buy these products, right? Yeah, we just laid everybody off. We don't pay anybody any wages, and then we raised prices. It's a perfect system. We're going to make a bunch of money. In Garmin's case, he was sharing advice rather than issuing a dire warning that developers will go extinct because of AI. His tone was optimistic, suggesting more creative opportunities for developers. He said AWS was helping employees continue to upskill and learn about new technologies to increase their productivity with the help of artificial intelligence. Being a developer in 2015 may be different than what was a developer in 2020, Garmin added. No more undifferentiated heavy lifting. An AWS spokesperson, Aisha Johnson, told Business Insider that Garmin's comments conveyed opportunities for developers to accomplish more than they do today with new AI tools. She added that there was no indication he expected a decline in the role of developers. Matt articulated a vision for how AWS will continue to remove undifferentiated heavy lifting from the developer experience so that builders can focus more on their skill and energy on the most innovative work, Johnson said in a statement. Everyone's a programmer now. Garmin isn't the first high-profile executive to predict this type of AI-driven change in developer jobs. NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, said that everyone is a programmer now because of new AI coding assistants. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella has speculated that easier access to AI technologies will create 1 billion developers. Ahmad Mostaq, Stability AI's former CEO, even predicted that there would be no programmers in 5 years. Talk about flooding a market, right? Like, so if you're making $100,000 as a programmer now, congratulations, you're now going to make zero. Because there's going to be 1 billion of you, right? Everyone's a programmer now, so it's a useless skill that you can't make any money at. If everybody's doing it, that's supply and demand, baby. Slavery. 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 Nilo writes, if Richard Medhurst is a socialist, that would make him a patsock too. He made a point to point out his patriotism in that post-arrest video. I don't know enough about that to talk to it. Long defiant. I'm an artificial intelligence accelerationist. Anything to disrupt the current system. Yeah, I feel like the system's going to disrupt itself. We don't need to accelerate anything. No one is going to accelerate the system of collapse and the system of decline faster than the capitalists themselves. They just can't help themselves, right? That they've shown over and over again in like routine, very basic, very 1 + 1 = 2 kind of ways that they don't really understand the system that they live in. They don't really understand the system that they operate in. Like they genuinely think that what we're going to do is lower everyone's wages and that will make everyone prosperous. Like, that's a real argument that they actually say out loud and expect to be taken seriously. And they say these things in, like, prominent places in public to be heard. Right? Like, they have absolutely no conception. Like, they literally think that money just appears in people's bank accounts. They have no conception whatsoever that, like, wages are money for people to buy your product. Lower people's wages, less money for people to buy product. Entire system, come grind halt, yes. Like, they just don't get it. Yep. Like, for example, Jeff points out, Chrystia Freeland said the middle class needs to take a pay cut. She was at the World Economic Forum, and she outright said on the stage that, yes, we agree, the middle class needs to take a pay cut. They're not going to like it, though. It's not going to be politically popular, but they should definitely take a pay cut, she said to people worth billions of dollars. Like, this insane detachment, this absolute inability to plant their feet on the ground and exist in reality. Nothing is going to accelerate the decline faster than capitalists. Like, these guys are self-interested, narcissistic psychos. They can't help themselves. right? And when the whole system comes grinding to a halt, right, they're all just going to retreat to their Jeffrey Epstein pedophile islands. Look at the apps that the new generation of developer are generating for them so they can find, vulnerable children to scoop up. And tell us to just work harder. That's what they're going to do. Austin, how you doing, my man? So this is an article. This is an article that caught my eye. Because we all know that there is a lot of Nazi apologetics, and we all know that there's a lot of denialism of our history. I'm a bit surprised to see it in The Atlantic. So I want to see how deep down the rabbit hole this one goes. Yeah, Jeff is writing, they're being so blatant that people who normally don't pay attention are waking up. I mean, out of a sense of just desperation more than anything, right? Like, if we just continue doing what we're doing now, like, the devastation is going to be extremely real, right? It's going to be extremely brutal. So this is from The Atlantic, the false narrative of settler colonialism. How do you like that, eh? How's that catch your ear? The false narrative of settler colonialism. Settler colonialism never happened. We certainly don't have documents like the Canadian Dominion Act or the Homesteaders Act. We certainly don't have basic history. Never happened. Here's the subheading. The rise of an academic theory and its obsession with Israel. This is by Adam Kirsch. So let's watch this guy embarrass himself in public. On October 7th, when history began, Hamas killed 4 times as many Israelis in a single day as had been killed in the previous 15 years of conflict. Yeah, they did it. Well done. In the months since, like, when the rebellion destroyed the Death Star, they killed more stormtroopers in that day than they had in the previous 15 years of the rebellion. Great. In the months since, protesters have rallied against Israel's retaliatory invasion of Gaza, which has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. But a new tone of excitement and enthusiasm could be heard among pro-Palestinian activists from the moment that news of the attacks arrived, well before the Israeli response began. Celebrations of Hamas's exploits are familiar sights in Gaza and the West Bank, Cairo and Damascus. This time they spread to elite college campuses, where Gaza's solidarity encampments became ubiquitous this past spring. Why? Why did we cheer when the rebellion blew up the Death Star? What were they cheering about? It's inscrutable. It's inscrutable to me. The answer is that long before October 7th, the Palestinian struggle against Israel had become widely understood by academic and progressive activists as the vanguard of a global battle against settler colonialism, a struggle also waged in the United States, Canada, Australia, and other countries created by European settlement. In these circles, Palestine was transformed into a standard reference point for every kind of social wrong, even those that seem to have no connection to the Middle East. No, bro. It's literally just that they're being colonized and they're defending against a colonial force. Like, that's it. Like it's not a mystery. It's not difficult to understand. Frauds like you make it difficult, right? You're the one who's obfuscating things. It's very obviously the case that Britain and America began a settler colonial project in Palestine, and now we are seeing the end result of that project of settler colonialism. There's no obfuscation to be had. It's not confusing. Only guys like you are sitting around going, what? What happened? The answer. No, hold on. One of the most striking things about the ideology, I love it, using a historical material analysis to acknowledge the reality of settler colonialism is now an ideology. Got it. It's like the ideology of physics. One of the most striking things about the ideology of settler colonialism is the central role played by Israel, which is often paired with the United States as the most important example of settler colonialism's evils. I mean, it's the most modern one. It's the one that's happening, right? We can see it. It's in front of our eyes, right? Like this guy is telling us to look at like a sheet of black paper and say that it's white, right? Like that's what this guy is trying to make us do. Many Palestinian writers and activists have adopted this terminology, right? Reality. What one would think that an educated person should acknowledge and adopt the language of reality. In his 2020 book, The 100 Years' War on Palestine, the historian Rashid Khalidi writes that the goal of Zionism was to create a white European settler colony. Yeah, the Zionists said so themselves. For the Palestinian intellectual Joseph Massad, Israel is a product of European Jewish settler colonialism. Right, as the Zionists said themselves. And the liberation referred to in the name of the Palestine Liberation Organization is liberation from settler colonialism. Right. I'm really looking for the guy to try to create an argument to say that reality doesn't exist. I'm waiting for the pivot. So, because so far it's just like, yeah, that's the whole case, right? Like it's not even really a case. It's just reality exists and that's what's happening. Western activists and academics have leaned heavily on the idea of reality, right? Opposition to building an oil pipeline under a Sioux reservation was like the Palestinian cause, in that it makes visible the continuum of systems and subjugation and expropriation across liberal democracies and settler colonial regimes, right? Like, literally kicking in people's doors and arresting them on unceded First Nations land and then forcing a pipeline through that land without their permission is most definitely a continuation of the project of settler colonialism, right? It's sort of baffling that this guy is really trying to set up that he understands the subject to really show that he's probably just a Nazi, right? Like, what do you guys think? You guys think at the bottom of this that this guy's probably just a Nazi? When the city of Toronto evicted a homeless encampment from a park, it was like Palestine because both are examples of ethnic cleansing and colonial domicide, making indigenous people homeless in their homelands. Health problems among Native Americans can be understood in terms of Palestine because the hyper-visible Palestinian case provides a unique temporal lens for understanding settler colonial health determinants more broadly. Pollution, too, can be understood through a Palestinian lens, according to the British organization Friends of the Earth, because Palestine demonstrates that the world is an unequal place, where marginalized and vulnerable people bear the brunt of injustice. How dare people use the most obvious, clear-cut, black and white, right in front of their face example of settler colonialism and try to use that as a way to make people understand more subtle interactions within their society, right? Like, I love that this guy's saying all this as if this is like a problem. Like, what do you guys think, right? Nazi? I'm getting Nazi vibes. Let's see if we can find the Nazism. Although Israel fails in obvious ways to fit the model of settler colonialism, how? Although Israel fails in obvious ways to fit the model of settler colonialism, how? How, bud? How? Right? How? Like, for real, how? He's just gonna say this, eh? He's just gonna say this, he's just gonna shit this turd right on your chest and just leave it there. Although Israel fails in obvious ways to fit the model of settler colonialism source required, it has become the standard reference point because it offers theorists and activists, something the United States does not. A plausible target? What? What the fuck? What the fuck are you talking about, bud? Like, the United States is a settler colonial project, right? The United States is a settler colonial project. It's just a settler colonial project that's, like, primarily achieved its goals, right? There are still reservations, and there are still, like, parts of it that are still intact and around. There's still, like, legal structure in all of this. Like, here in Canada, the Indian Act is an obvious settler colonial document. But it's not, like, ongoing and being enacted in a brutal and obvious way, right? The genocide of the Palestinians is happening now. It's happening right now, right in front of our eyes, for us to see, right? With our eyes, on a live stream that we can look at, on our phones that we carry around in our pockets. And then dimwits, little creepy fascist Nazis like you, can pretend like the reason why we're focusing on Palestine is because there's no plausible targets. What the fuck are you talking about? I guess the 60s scoop didn't happen. I guess the genocide of the First Nations people just didn't happen, right? The ethnic cleansing of North and South America just didn't happen, right? Just, this is embarrassing genocide apologetics. That's what this is. Creepy, weird little Nazi. Odd that this got published in The Atlantic. It is hard to imagine America or Canada being truly decolonized with the descendants of the original settler. He immediately says that we're settlers. Like, immediately. It's right there. Like, he it's in your own language, my man. We can't. I'm going to start from the beginning of this paragraph to show you how stupid this guy actually is. Like, this is stupidity, right? It's either stupidity or it's an intentionally malicious. Although Israel fails in obvious ways to fit the model of settler colonialism, source required, it has become the standard reference point because it offers theorists and activists something that the United States does not, a plausible target. Very next sentence. It is hard to imagine America or Canada being truly decolonized. So we did colonize it. So the plausible target is our own country. It's your sentence. You used the word decolonized. So we colonized it. With the descendants of the original settlers, settler colonialists, returning to the countries from which they came, and the native peoples reclaiming the land. But armed struggle against Israel has been ongoing since it was founded. What? And Hamas and its allies still hope to abolish the Jewish state between the river and the sea. In the contemporary world, only in Israel can the fight against settler colonialism move from theory to practice. So not only is this guy like a weird, creepy little Nazi that refutes his own points within the context of his own paragraphs, sentence by sentence, he's also just dumb. He doesn't know anything about what's going on. Like, what state was that? Here, let's get this information correct. Let's go to Google Maps. Like, we got to stop listening to people who don't know anything about anything. So the state of Oklahoma ceded First Nations territory back to the First Nations people, right? You can take a look here. See, it's on Google Maps, and if it's on Google Maps, then it's true. The Chickasaw Nation, the Choctaw Nation, the Cherokee Nation, and the Muskogee Creek Nation all had land ceded back to them by the state of Oklahoma. You can see it here, right? It's right here, right? You can read all about it. Ding, ding, ding. That's a very clear-cut case, right, of the fight against settler colonialism moving from theory to practice. A very clear, obvious, very straightforward event that anybody could know about, especially somebody who's pretending to be an expert about settler colonialism when he's obviously just a dim-witted Nazi, could find out and should know about, right? He probably does know about this, but he's just not telling you because he's a bad faith actor who's interested in acting as an apologist for a genocidal nation. The concept of settler colonialism was developed in the 1990s by theorists in Australia. I mean, literally, historians looked back and were like, oh yeah, that's settlers colonizing a country. That's what that is. A way of linking social evils in these countries today, such as climate change, patriarchy, and economic inequality, to their origin in colonial settlement. Right. It's difficult to extract slavery and genocide from how we're acting today, right? If your dad or your grandpa had a slave, probably colors your opinion, right? You can see that in the figure of Elon Musk, right? Who obviously has pro-settler, pro-slavery sentiments. Probably because his dad owned emerald mines in apartheid South Africa, and that he was born in apartheid South Africa, and that he's an apartheid baby. In the past decade, settler colonialism has become one of the most important concepts in the academic humanities, the subject of hundreds of books and thousands of papers, as well as college courses on topics such as U.S. history, public health, and gender studies. Yeah, because it's important, my man. I'm really waiting for the screw to turn, for this guy to make his argument, right? So far, he's just showing that, like, yeah, I understand the basics of the subject. Now I'm going to just be a weird, creepy little Nazi and pretend like none of that matters. For the academic field of settler colonial studies, the settlement process is characterized by European settlers discovering a land they consider terra nullius, the legal property of no one, right, except the people living on it, their insatiable hunger for expansion that fills an entire continent, and the destruction of indigenous peoples and cultures. The model, drawn from the history of Anglophone colonies such as the United States and Australia, is regularly applied to the history of Israel, even though it does not include any of these hallmarks. Just a lie. Just a lie. Literally, Ben Gurion explicitly stated that the goal of Israel was to ethnically cleanse the region. Like, and to colonize Palestine. Like, shut up. Just an embarrassing, fraudulent liar. How did this get published? When modern Zionist settlement in what is the occupied territories of Palestine, in what is now Israel, began in the 1880s, Palestine was a province of the Ottoman Empire. And after World War I, it was ruled by the British under mandate from the League of Nations. So, far from being no one's land, Jews could settle there only with the permission of an imperial government. Right. You're describing the process of settler colonialism. And when that permission was withdrawn, as it fatefully was in 1939, when the British sharply limited Jewish immigration on the eve of the Holocaust, they had no recourse. Far from expanding to fill a continent, as in North America and Australia, the state of Israel today is about the size of New Jersey. Oh, so it's very small, so it's not the same. Got it. The language, culture, and religion of the Arab peoples remained overwhelmingly dominant. 76 years after Israel was founded, it is still the only Jewish country in the region, among 22 Arab countries, from Morocco to Iraq. Right. Because it's a settler colonial project backed by the British and the Americans, as you have just yourself explicitly shown the history of. Like, that's the thing about these weird, creepy Zionists, right? These creepy, like, Zio-fascists, like these Zio-Nazis, right? Is that they'll tell you their history and then be like, and that's why we are good. And you're like, so you understand that you're ethnically cleansing the place. Yeah. And that you understand that you're the settler colonialists. Yeah. And you understand that that makes you bad, right? No, we're good. Got it, bud. Most important, the Jewish state did not erase or replace the people already living in Palestine. How did this get published, man? How is the Atlantic allowing these Zio-Nazis to publish this shit? Most important, the Jewish state did not erase or replace the people already living in Palestine. Literally, comma, not even the next sentence, comma, though it did displace many of them. What a weird little Nazi this guy is. Here, the comparison between European settlement in North America and Jewish settlement in Israel is equally inapt. In the decades after Europeans arrived in Massachusetts, the Native American population of New England declined from about 140,000 to 10,000 by one estimate. Thanks, bud. And I'm sure that's well sourced. I'm sure that you, an illiterate moronic Zio-Nazi, is sourcing accurately. In fact, let's just click on it. What's your estimate? Who's your source? Ooh, digital history. Here we go. We're at digitalhistory.uh.uh.uh.ed. Although most of New England settlers were Puritans, like literally, I bet you anything that this is straight up. What is this? Who is digital history? We're literally sourcing like this looks like something that my dad would have written, right? Like, what is this even? Digital history. The first Americans. Okay, hold on. Partners, credit, contact, credits. Who are you? National Endowment for the Humanities. I feel like National Endowment for the Humanities has a big... So it's just straight up, like... Like, isn't this just straight up? Like, doesn't this just scream CIA? Doesn't this just scream CIA? Don't you guys think? Right? Don't you guys think that this is just screaming CIA right in your face? Where's the Wikipedia? Yeah, the National Endowment for the Humanities is an independent federal agency of the U.S. government, established by the National Foundation of the Arts and Humanities, dedicated to supporting research, sub-agency. And I bet when they're reporting on, like, the Native American population of New England declined by 140,000 to 10,000, they're doing it because we're amazing, because we're the best, we're the greatest. All right, by one estimate from the CIA. So the only source this guy has given us so far for any of his claims is literally the CIA. Got it. In the decades after 1948, the Arab population of historic Palestine more than quintupled, from about 1.4 million to about 7.4 million. This tired, boring, lame argument, right? That the line was going like this, and then it went like that, and it kept growing. So just because the genocide is being ineffective, right? Just because the genocide isn't completely effective, doesn't mean that. That means that, like, just because the Israelis suck at it, doesn't mean they're not trying to do it. You can literally just see the quotes from Ben Gurion himself. Like, I just don't know what you need here, my man. The persistence of the conflict in Israel-Palestine is due precisely to the coexistence of two people in the same land, as opposed to the classic sites of settler colonialism, where European settlers decimated native people. So your argument is that because the Zionists were bad at it, it's not a genocide and it's not settler colonialism, right? You understand how stupid this makes... I'm sorry. No, you understand very little. You're citing the CIA, right? Your argument is that Zionists suck and are terrible at doing genocide and settler colonialism, therefore it isn't settler colonialism, which is a stupid argument to make. It's just a bad argument, right? Just because someone is... like, if Jason Voorhees was chasing after someone with a knife in order to stab them to death, but, like, was tripping over his feet the whole time and couldn't reach them, right? It wouldn't make them less... It would make him less threatening, obviously, but it wouldn't make his intention any different, right? That the Zionists have always been a settler colonial ethnic cleansing state, and just because they suck at it and are terrible like everything else they do doesn't make it any less so, you creepy, weird little fascist Nazi. In the 21st century, The clearest examples of ongoing settler colonialism can probably be found in China. Here we go. Here we go. Gotta jam it in. Gotta jam it in. Here we go. In 2023, the United Nations Human Rights Office reported, CIA report, I'm almost sure of it, separation of, it's Tibetans. We're talking about the Tibetans. I thought this was going the Uyghur direction. The Chinese government had compelled nearly 1 million Tibetan children to attend residential schools. Dude, that's a new one. UN experts alarmed by separation of 1 million Tibetan children from families and forced assimilation at residential schools. I bet it's just a school, right? I bet it's just a school, right? Like, imagine if we reported on our school system the same way that we reported on Chinese schools, right? Children are forced to go to schools to be re-educated by threat of prison. Like, this is pathetic. It's just pathetic. Forcing the next generation of Tibetans to speak Mandarin is a long-term effort to Sinicize the region, which also includes encouraging Han Chinese to settle there and prohibiting public displays of traditional Buddhist faith. Source required. You've lied before, so source required, right? Teaching people the language of the country is not ethnic cleansing, right? Like, it just isn't. Like, I have seen this government try to make the claim that there is a genocide against the Uyghur people, even as they send film crews into the supposed residential schools where they are literally teaching people Uyghur. Like, you guys are fraudulent liars. And a fraudulent liar like yourself fraudulently bringing up this lie makes a lot of sense. Creepy, weird little Nazi. China has mounted a similar campaign against the Uyghur people. Ding, 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 ding. In the northwestern province of Xinjiang. How did this article get published, dude? Since 2017, more than 1 million. So the number used to be 8 million, right? Circa Adrian Zenz. You can look this fraudulent loser up. More than 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been detained in what the Chinese government calls a vocational training centers. And the BBC sent a film crew in. I did a video about it, right? There's a video on my channel where I looked at the BBC sending a film crew into these vocational centers. And you know what they found? They found a school. And not just a school where they literally let people go at the end of the day. Whoa, genocide! Super big genocide where they teach people their own language. Which other countries, other creepy, weird little Nazi countries like yours, the government is described the detention or re-education camps. Yeah, right. Meanwhile, on the United States-Mexican border, the government is also seeking to bring down Uyghur birth rates through mass sterilization and involuntary birth control. Source required. These campaigns include every element of settler colonialism as defined by academic theorists. Yeah, the difference is that we can see one, right? The difference is that one is visible and we can see it, and the other one is just like a narrative being crafted by the settler colonial states, right? Specifically so that they can do exactly what you're doing, which is point at them and say, see, we're not so bad. We're not so bad. It's the Chineses that are actually the bad guys. If you look at the Uyghurs and look at the Tibetans, they're ethnically cleansing them, even though no one's got a picture of it or any evidence whatsoever, and all the documents come from the CIA. Like, yeah, XD. Don't trust your eyes, you guys. Gaza genocide not real. Uyghur genocide real. Exactly. CH writes, Adrian Zenz, just wow, he went there. Yeah, why shouldn't I? Adrian Zenz is like the beating heart of the Uyghur genocide lie, right? Oh, Savannah! These campaigns include every element of settler colonialism as defined by academic theorists, if they were real, and they're not. They aim to replace an existing people and culture with a new one, which is weird because they're teaching them Uyghur. The BBC captured that on film. I could show you the video. Imported from imperial metropole, including techniques frequently disguised as genocidal in the context of North American history. Right, if you lie, which you're doing, nakedly. I don't know how this article got printed, right? Like, this article is actually an indictment of the Atlantic itself, right? It's just publishing total bullshit given to them, like, directly by the CIA. Tibet's residential schools are a tool of forced assimilation, which is odd because they're teaching them Tibetan. Like, it's just the weirdest thing to say. Like the ones established for Native American children in Canada and the United States in the 19th century. This is genocide apologencia, right? The residential schools, like, we literally have people in parliament buildings explicitly saying that their goal was to cleanse the culture, to kill the native. Right? That's the phrase. We have people voting on it. Where is this? Where is this in the Chinese context? Oh, it doesn't exist. Interesting. And some scholars of settler colonialism have drawn these parallels, acknowledging, in the words of the anthropologist Carol McGranahan, that an imperial formation is likely to be Chinese communist, of course, and of the 20th or 21st centuries as it is to be English capitalist of the 18th or 19th centuries. Nazism is the same as communism, guys. That's what this is. Nazism is the same as communism, right? Just absolutely, totally brain fucking dead. You just cannot get more brain fucking dead than this. Look at the top of spooky buildings. I've got a document where Xi Jinping is talking about a guy that massacred 30 people with a machete, and that means he's after babies. Like, this is the logic that they're using, and you're just supposed to I love it. I have no critical thinking skills at all. Like, how about a picture? Oh, we do have a picture of it, actually. The BBC sent a film crew in, and you know what they found? They found the Chinese teaching Uyghur people their own language. The horror. Yet Tibet and Xinjiang, like India's rule in Kashmir and the Indonesian occupation of East Timor from 1975 to 1999, occupy a tiny fraction of the space devoted to Israel-Palestine on the mental map of settler colonial studies. Right, because settler colonial academics are serious people, right? They're serious people who use evidence and facts. And the CIA is not evidence. Right? The CIA is not evidence. And so if you're going to refer to the CIA documentation, any times the CIA can get a document into the UN, anytime the CIA can find a hack like Carol Manahan in order to act as their surrogate fraud to dispense this bullshit information into the society, they're going to look at it and they're going to reject it out of hand. Why? Because the CIA is not an authority. The CIA is a fraudulent, lying group of terrorists whose objective is to disseminate lies into the public. So if you're a serious academic, right, if you're a serious historian who wants to be considered serious and wants to actually be credentialed and be taken seriously within your institutions, you're going to reject the CIA, right, as a valid source of information. Because if you were to put the CIA on the table, your peers would ridicule you and you would go down significantly in the ranks of your own field. Right? So if you want to be taken seriously, you shouldn't be saying the stuff that you're saying, which is that the CIA said so. The CIA said so it's true. Hard to imagine why we here at the Canadian Commie are being shadow banned and pushed aside. Please like the stream. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Please send it around. Please let people know that we exist. Right? We have to push back against these absolute Nazis. And if we allow this kind of propaganda to disseminate into the society unchallenged, they're going to win. Simple as that. Nilo writes, funny how no one talks about the Rohingya anymore, maybe because their genociders are losing their war now and their capacity to genocide. Anemone agrees. Jeff writes, John, China recognizes 5 official language. And there is one of the 5. They have heavily invested the area to protect their culture and make it a destination. Yeah. You can literally just, like, I don't know what you need, you know? Like, it's so childishly simple to show that Xinjiang travel. Like, a trip to Xinjiang. Uyghur China you never knew existed. No. Ad break, ad break, ad break, ad break, ad break, ad break, while we deal with this. Yabba, yabba, yabba. For those of you who are listening at home, I'm putting a video on that's from YouTube, just of Xinjiang travel, right? It's, like, if I show you pictures of Gaza, it's going to be rubble. People living in tents, bombs going off, right? Children wearing bandages, right? Torment and torture, right? Oh, the horror, the genocide. Like, it's not a rich metropolis city, obviously, right? China is still dealing with lots of poverty and is doing what it can to alleviate that poverty as time moves forward, obviously. But is it a genocide? You guys are seeing the genocide? Where are we seeing the genocide? Oh, it's a genocidal bus full of genocidal people. The genocide bus. Oh, a genocidal market. A guy selling genocide dates. It just gets childish. It's just so childishly simple to show that it's fucking bullshit. Ugh. Ugh. Yet, let's go back to the article. Yet, Tibet and Xinjiang, like India's rule in Kashmir and the Indonesian occupation of the East Timor from 1975 to 1999, occupy a tiny fraction of the space devoted to Israel-Palestine on the mental map of settler colonial studies. Right, again, because the CIA isn't a valid source. Right, we like evidence. And there's lots of evidence to show the settler colonial history of Gaza, and no evidence whatsoever to your claims at all. And in fact, lots of evidence to counter your claims. Some of the reasons for this are practical. Yeah, like, for example, it's not true. The academic discipline mainly flourishes in English-speaking countries. So here, he's just going to accuse them of racism. Got it. And its practitioners usually seem to be monolingual, making it necessary to focus on countries where sources are either written in English or easily available in translation. This rules out any place where a language barrier is heightened by strict government censorship like China. Just as important, settler colonial theorists tend to come from the fields of anthropology and sociology rather than history. Source required. Area studies, source required, and international relations, source required. And they would be exposed to a wider range of examples of past and present conflict. So the guy's basically just saying that oh, it's the settler colonialists are the actual racists. Projection much, my man, projection much. But the focus on Israel-Palestine isn't only a product of the discipline's limitations. It is doctrinal. Here we go. Academics and activists find adding the Israel-Palestine conflict to other causes powerfully energizing. Yeah, because it's real and it exists. A way to give local address to a struggle that can otherwise feel all too abstract. The price of collapsing together such different causes, however, is that it inhibits understanding of each individual case. Maybe by you, right? Who get your sources from, like, the CIA. Any conflict that fails to fit the settler colonial model must be made to fit. Oh, I see. It's being made to fit. Got it. So they won't use the Uyghur situation or the Tibetan situation because they're not making that to fit because they're racists, right? Because they don't understand Chinese. It's too difficult for them. But they're doing it with Israel and Palestine. They're making it to fit, right? Because it collapses together their different causes, right? Do you see how incoherent this language, like how incoherent this worldview is? Like the mental gymnastics of why it isn't just the case that that's obviously a settler colonial genocide. Like you're seeing how blisteringly stupid these people actually are, and they're so desperate to provide information to you that they're literally grabbing documents from terrorist organizations like the CIA, who lead you into fraudulent wars constantly, and putting them in front of you going, look, take them seriously this time. They're not lying this time. Okay, bud. Wink. Israel also fails to fit the model of settler colonialism in another key way. So first of all, you have not shown how Israel does not fit the model at all. So you say another way. Well, you haven't provided a first way. So this is the first way, right? So just if I were an editor, which clearly an editor didn't look at this, because any editor would have been like, rejected, thanks. We publish facts here at The Atlantic. Israel also fails to fit the model of settler colonialism in another key way, whatever the other key ways were, we don't know. It defies the usual division between foreign colonizers and indigenous people. Does it now? In the discourse of settler colonialism, indigenous peoples aren't simply those who happened to occupy a territory before Europeans discovered it. Rather, indigeneity is a moral and spiritual status associated with qualities such as authenticity, selflessness, and wisdom. Listen to this fucking loser. Listen to this huge, massive Zio-Nazi fucking loser right now. No, it's not about the fact that people were living there for thousands of years. It's about the fact that Palestinians don't have authenticity, selflessness, and wisdom. This guy's a Nazi. A naked, right in your face, open Nazi. Right here. He's showing it to you. These values stand as a reproof to settler ways of being, which are insatiably destructive. And the moral contrast between settler and indigene comes to overlap with other binaries. White and non-white, exploiter and exploited, victor and victim. Yeah, because the guy I want judging who has authenticity, selflessness, and wisdom is a guy who's using CIA documents to lie about a genocide, while pretending like the genocide that's happening in Gaza isn't happening. What a fucking loser this guy is. This is fucking loser talk. Until recently, Palestinian leaders preferred to avoid the language of indigeneity. He keeps using this word, indigeneity, seeing the implicit comparison between themselves and Native Americans as defeatist. In an interview near the end of his life in 2004, PLO chair Yasser Arafat declared, "We are not red Indians, right?" Like, do you not? Can you not tell the difference between Palestinians and First Nations people, my man? Is that something that's happening right now? But today's activists are more eager to embrace the indigenous label and the moral valences that go with it. And some theorists have begun to recast Palestinian identity in ecological, spiritual, and aesthetic terms, long associated with Native American identity. Right, because it makes sense, right? We ethnically cleanse the First Nations people in North America, and we're ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, right? Pretty obvious to anybody who isn't a weird, creepy little Zio-Nazi. The American academic Stephen Saleta has written that the Palestinian claims to life are based in having a culture indivisible from their surroundings. Right, they're there. A language of freedom concordant to the beauty of that land. Jamal Nabulsi of the University of Queensland writes that Palestinian indigenous sovereignty is in and of the land. It is grounded in an embodied connection to Palestine and articulated in Palestinian ways of being, knowing and resisting on and for this land. Right, the land that they were on and born on and where they live, right? Like some Brooklyn Jew coming to Israel and throwing a Palestinian out of his house and stealing his house, right? He has less connection to the land than the guy that was born in that house. This kind of language, here comes the Zio-Nazi. This kind of language points to an aspect of the concept of indigeneity that is often tacitly overlooked in the Native American context. It's irrationalism. So now he's saying the First Nations people are irrational. The idea that different peoples have incommensurable ways of being and knowing, rooted in their relationship to a particular landscape, comes out of German romantic nationalism. This guy's a loser. What a fucking loser. The idea that I was born on this land and my father was born on this land and my father's father was born on this land did not come out of German romantic nationalism. What a fucking Nazi loser this guy is. Originating in the early 19th century in the work of philosophers such as Johann Gottlieb Fichte and Johann Gottlieb Herder, it eventually degenerates into the blood and soil nationalism of Nazi ideologues such as Richard Walther Dare, who in the 1930s hymned what might be called an embodied connection to Germany. The German soul, with all its warmness, is rooted in the native landscape and has, in a sense, always grown out of it. Whoever takes this natural landscape away from the German soul kills it. What a loser this guy is. This guy's a fucking Nazi. Like, abso-fucking-lutely, dude. Yeah, the Native American people saying, hey, we were born on this land, it's wrong that we be cleansed from this land, is exactly the same as the fucking blood and soil Nazis. Exactly the same. What a fucking loser this guy is. For Dare, this rootedness in the land meant that Germans could never thrive in cities, among the rootless ways of thinking of the urbanite. The rootless urbanite par excellence for Nazi ideology was, of course, the Jew. For Salata, the exaltation of Palestinian indigeneity leads to the very same conclusion about quote-unquote Zionists. Creepy little Nazi needs to put the word Zionists in quotations for some reason, even though Zionism is a well-established religious ideology, right? Who usurp the land but can never be vitally rooted in it. In their ruthless schema, land is neither pleasure nor sustenance. It is a commodity. Having been anointed Jewish, the land ceases to be dynamic. It is an ideological fabrication with fixed characteristics, which is kind of just a capitalist observation, right? The commodification of land. In this way, well, where's the quotations this time, bud? Where's the quotations this time? No quotations this time? Oh, okay, so we're going to get rid of the quotations? In this way, anti-Zionism converges with older patterns of anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish thinking. It is true, of course, that criticisms of Israel is not inherently anti-Semitic. Virtually anything that an Israeli government does is likely to be harshly criticized by many Israeli Jews themselves. But it is also true that anti-Semitism is not simply a matter of personal prejudice against Jews, existing on an entirely different plane than politics. The term anti-Semitism was coined in Germany in the late 19th century because the old term Jew hatred sounded too instinctive and brutal to describe what it was. In fact, a political ideology, an account of the way the world works and how it should be changed. I love that this guy is like, no, of course, criticizing Israel doesn't make you anti-Semitism, but here's the history lesson of anti-Semitism, you anti-Semite. Wilhelm Marr, the German writer who popularized the word, complained in his 1879 book, The Victory of Judaism Over Germanism, that the Jewish spirit and Jewish consciousness have overpowered the world. That spirit for Marr was materialism and selfishness, profiteering and usury. The anti-Semitic political parties in Europe attacked Semitism in the same way that the socialists attacked capitalism. The saying, anti-Semitism is the socialism is fools, was used by Germans left at this time. By the German left at this time, recognizing the structural similarities between these rival worldviews. Let's take capitalism, ascribe it to the Jews, and then blame the Jews instead of the system of capital. The identification of Jews with soulless materialism made sense to the 19th century Europeans because it translated into one of the oldest doctrines of Christianity into the language of modern politics. The Apostle Paul, a Jew who became a follower of Jesus, explained the difference between his old faith and his new one by identifying Judaism with material things, the circumcision of the flesh, the letter of the law, and Christianity with spiritual things, the circumcision of the heart, the new law, written not with ink but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone but on tablets of human hearts. Look at this guy pretend to be a Christian theologist, right? Not only is he a fraudulent, lying Zio-Nazi, he's also a heretic. Today, the characterization of Jews as stubborn, heartless, and materialistic is seldom publicly expressed in the language of Christianity, as in the Middle Ages or the language of race as in the 19th century, but is quite respectable to say exactly the same thing in the language of settler colonialism, right? There it is. Now, I'm not saying you're an anti-Semite, but you're an anti-Semite. As the historian David Nierenberg has written, We live in an age in which millions of people are exposed daily to some variant of the argument that the challenges of the world they live in are best explained in the terms of Israel, except that today Israel refers not to the Jewish people, but to the Jewish state. Right. Like, so if we criticize Israel, we're not anti-Semites, but we are, is what this guy is basically telling you. When those embracing the ideology, the factual reality of settler colonialism, think about political evil, Israel is an example that comes instinctively to hand, right, because of all of the evidence. Just as Jews were for anti-Semitism and Judaism was for Christianity. Just an embarrassing claim made by a heretic and a fraud. Perhaps the most troubling reactions to the October 7th attack were those of college students, convinced that the liberation of Palestine is the key to banishing injustice from the world. Yeah, fighting back against a genocide, right? What a bad thing to do. In November 2023, for instance, Northwestern University's student newspaper published a letter signed by 65 student organizations, including the Rainbow Alliance, Ballet Folkloricio, Northwestern, and All Paws Inn, which sends volunteers to animal shelters, defending the use of the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." The phrase looks forward to the disappearance of any form of Jewish state between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, but the student groups denied that this entails murder and genocide. Rather, they wrote, "When we say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, we imagine a world free of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-blackness, militarism, occupation, and apartheid." What a horror, right? As a political program, this is nonsensical, right? Genocidal maniacs only understand the world in a genocidal context. So it's either we do the genocide or we receive the genocide. So this guy only understands things in the language of genocide, while he actively denies the genocide and the settler colonial project that's happening. How could dismantling Israel bring about the end of militarism in China, Russia, or Iran? What a weirdo. What a creepy weirdo this guy is. Like, obviously not, you dumb. How could it lead to the end of anti-black racism in America or anti-Muslim prejudice in India? What a moron. But for the ideology of settler colonialism, actual political conflicts become symbolic battles between light and darkness, and anyone found on the wrong side is a fair target. Yeah, people found on the wrong side of a genocide should be a fair target. Young Americans today who celebrate the massacre of Israelis and harass their Jewish peers on college campuses are not ashamed of themselves for the same reason that earlier generations were not ashamed to persecute and kill Jews. Yeah, right. So we're the anti-Semites, even though you just are saying that Zionists and Jews are the same. Who's the actual anti-Semite here? Because they have been taught that is an expression of virtue. Yeah, fighting against genocide is a virtuous thing to do, you creepy, weird, little Zio-Nazi. This article was written by Adam Kirsch, a obvious Nazi, clearly a Zionist. It was published in The Atlantic. This article discredits The Atlantic big time because they clearly just regurgitated a bunch of CIA propaganda in front of us with absolutely no journalism happening whatsoever. This is a fraudulent, ridiculous, hysteria-filled document that should be repudiated by literally everybody that reads it. And the fact that it's being published and spread into the world should absolutely terrify every single person. This guy, Adam Kirsch, is totally fine massacring babies. Completely fine with that. He's a soulless vampire. This is what we are fighting. So thank you, Adam Kirsch, for reminding us how ghoulish, demonic, and evil the project of settler colonialism is in Palestine. Thanks, bud. Yeah, and Anemone pointing out, Palestinians are Semites, by the way. Wild argument. Yeah. Ugh. I have to use the bathroom. I'll be right back. 1 second, guys. It's articles like this that remind me how popular fascism actually is as an ideology in the United States. Like, this is a disgusting article, right? Written by an obvious fraud. And yet lots and lots of people are going to read an article like this and have it confirm their fascist belief system, right? Because fascism is extremely popular. It's an extremely popular ideology that people really go for. Hold on one second. Oh. Ugh, forget it. Like, we've seen the live stream. Like, I just don't know what these guys think is actually going on. Zummerman writes, is the Atlantic linked to the think tank, the Atlantic Group? I've heard Greg Stoker going off on them multiple times. I have no idea. Mr. Moon. Ah, it's the Atlantic, the illegally killed babies people. Yeah, very good. Yeah, XD writes, they're trying so hard to project white supremacy and colonialism on the Han Chinese. For sure. Also, we are not arming China to do anything. We are arming Israel and Ukraine, and we're arming Contras and Saudis. Yeah. So, yes, we talk more about shit we are doing is not strange. Yeah. Ugh. If your country was founded on fascism, it will be the predominant ideology among the populace. Yeah, for sure. Like, it's just so wild that anytime there's any kind of pushback, even as they are like acting like genocidal madmen, then articles like this come out. It's just so overwhelmingly fraudulent. Like, look how much this guy wrote to basically just go, nuh-uh. Just this absolute baby brain bullshit. And he pulled out all the stops, eh? The real genociders are the Chinese, actually. As if America doesn't have a huge, massive history of bombing the shit out of countries, right? Like literally we're sending death squads into Afghanistan to shoot children in the streets. And like this guy's just like, the Chinese are teaching Chinese to Chinese citizens. It's genocide. Yeah, spooky, scary Fu Manchu. Yeah, exactly, dude. Exactly. Ugh. Like, it is no wonder that the society that seems completely incapable of dealing with something that's like right in front of our faces, right? Like the genocide of the Gazan people is like directly in front of our faces. It's directly in front of us, right? You can see it. There's video upon video upon video upon video of it. Like it's naked. The leaders of Israel have said that they want to do it. You can read the ICC report. You can read the ICJ report. You can read this shit. You can just see the collection of information that exists. The overwhelming evidence, right? But I'm supposed to completely ignore that and pay attention to some creepy CIA guy who is telling a blatant naked lie about China that, okay, can I see a picture of it? No. It's like that scene from The Simpsons where Principal Skinner has Superintendent Chalmers over. We've all seen this meme, right? And Superintendent Chalmers goes, there's a fire going on in Principal Skinner's kitchen. What? Good Lord, what's happening in your kitchen? Aurora Borealis? At this time of day, in this location, located exclusively in your kitchen. Yes. Can I see it? No. That's exactly what's happening. We're just, there's a genocide happening in China. Oh, goodness, can I see it? No. And the moment they say yes, The moment they're actually like, well, I guess we should have some credibility and actually send in a film crew or maybe send a drone over with a camera or something, right? What do they find? They find a school where they're teaching Uyghur people Uyghur. What's the fucking problem here? Like, and so, of course, we shouldn't expect a society that's incapable of meaningfully engaging with reality to meaningfully engage with reality on the issue of climate change, right? This is from The Conversation. The overshoot myth. You can't keep burning fossil fuels and expect scientists of the future to get us back to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Record-breaking fossil fuel production, all-time high greenhouse gas emissions, and extreme temperatures. Like the proverbial frog in the heating pan of water, we refuse to respond to the climate and ecological crisis with any sense of urgency. Under such circumstances, claims from some that global warming can still be limited to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius take on a surreal quality. For example, at the start of 2023's international climate negotiations in Dubai, conference president Sultan Al Jaber boldly stated that 1.5 degrees Celsius was his goal, and that his presidency should be guided by a deep sense of urgency to limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. He made such lofty promises while planning a massive increase in oil and gas production as CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. We should not be surprised to see such behavior from the head of a fossil fuel company, but Al Jaber is not an outlier. Scratch at the surface of almost any net zero pledge or policy that claims to be aligned with the 1.5 degree Celsius goal of the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement, and you will reveal the same sort of reasoning. We can avoid dangerous climate change without actually doing what this demands, which is to rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from industry, transport, energy, 70% of total, and food systems, 30% of total, while ramping up energy efficiency. A particularly instructive example is Amazon. In 2019, the company established a 2040 net zero. Remember when it was 2030? Remember that joke? Established a 2040 net zero target, which was then verified by the UN Science-Based Targets Initiative, which has been leading the charge in getting companies to establish climate targets compatible with the Paris Agreement. But over the next 4 years, Amazon's emissions went up by 40%. Given this dismal performance, the SBTI was forced to act and remove Amazon and over 200 companies from its corporate net zero standard. Net zero itself is a total fucking joke. What I'll do is I'll remove all your blood, but I'll give you a lot of sugar to replace that blood. It'll be fine. This is also not surprising given that net zero and even the Paris Agreement have been built around the perceived need to keep burning fossil fuels, at least in the short term. Not to do so would threaten economic growth. Oh no, the fake numbers on a screen for Warren Buffett. Given that fossil fuels will supply over 80% of total global energy. The trillions of dollars of fossil fuel assets at risk with rapid decarbonization have also served as powerful brakes on climate action. I just can't wait for some of these to just start lighting on fire. You know? Oh, my assets lit on fire. Oh, if only we had done something about climate change. Overshoot. The way to understand this doublethink, that we can avoid dangerous climate change while continuing to burn fossil fuels, is that it relies on the concept of overshoot. The promise is that we can overshoot past any amount of warming with the deployment of planetary-scale carbon dioxide removal, dragging temperatures back down by the end of the century. Like, literally what the capitalists are trying to convince us is to have a fist fight with Mother Nature. And that will actually win. This not only cripples any attempt to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, but risks catastrophic levels of climate change as it locks us into energy and material-intensive solutions, which for the most part exist only on paper. To argue that we can safely overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius or any amount of warming is saying the quiet bit out loud. We simply don't care about the increasing amount of suffering and deaths that will be caused while the recovery is worked on. A key element of overshoot is carbon dioxide removal. This is essentially a time machine. We are told we can turn back the clock of decades of delay by sucking carbon dioxide directly out of the atmosphere. We don't need rapid decarbonization now, because in the future, we will be able to take back those carbon emissions. If, or when, that doesn't work, we are led to believe that even more outlandish geoengineering approaches, such as spraying sulfurous compounds into the high atmosphere in an attempt to block out sunlight, which amounts to planetary refrigeration, will save us. The 2015 Paris Agreement was an astonishing accomplishment. The establishment of 1.5 degrees Celsius as being internationally agreed ceiling for warming was a success for those people and nations most exposed to climate change hazards. We know that every fraction of a degree matters. But at the time, believing warming could really be limited to well below 2 degrees Celsius required a leap of faith when it came to nations and companies putting their shoulder to the wheel of decarbonization. What has happened instead is that the net zero approach of Paris is becoming detached from reality as it increasingly relies on science fiction levels of speculative technology. There is arguably an even bigger problem with the Paris Agreement. By framing climate change in terms of temperature, it focuses on the symptoms, not the cause. 1.5 degrees Celsius or any amount of warming is the result of humans changing the energy balance of the climate by increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This traps more heat. Changes in the global average temperature is the established way of measuring this increase in heat, but no one experiences this average. Climate change is dangerous because of weather that affects particular places at particular times. Simply put, this extra heat is making weather more unstable. Unfortunately, having temperature targets makes solar geoengineering seem like a sensible approach because it may lower temperatures. But it does this by not reducing, but increasing our interference in the climate system. Trying to block out the sun in response to increasing carbon emissions is like turning on the air conditioning in response to a house fire. In 2021, we argued that net zero was a dangerous trap. 3 years on, and we can still see the jaws of this trap beginning to close, with climate policy being increasingly framed in terms of overshoot. The resulting impacts on food and water security, poverty, human health, and the destruction of biodiversity and ecosystems will produce intolerable suffering. This situation demands honesty and a change of course. If this does not materialize when things are likely to deteriorate, potentially rapidly, and in ways that may be impossible to control. The time has come to accept that climate policy has failed, and that the 2015 landmark Paris Agreement is dead. We let it die by pretending that we could both continue to burn fossil fuels and avoid dangerous climate change at the same time. Rather than demand the immediate phase-out of fossil fuels, the Paris Agreement proposed 22nd century temperature targets, which could be met by balancing the sources and sinks of carbon. Within that ambiguity, net zero flourished. And yet, apart from the COVID economic shock in 2020, emissions have increased every year since 2015, reaching an all-time high in 2023. Despite there being abundant evidence that climate action makes good economic sense, the cost of inaction vastly exceeds the cost of action. No country strengthened their pledges, at least 3 COPs, the annual UN international meetings, even though it was clear that the world was on course to sail past 2 degrees Celsius, let alone 1.5 degrees Celsius. Man, it really is ACAB, right? All cops are bad. The Paris Agreement should be producing a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, but current policies mean they are on track to be higher than they are today. We do not deny that significant progress has been made with renewable technologies. Rate of deployment of wind and solar have increased each year for the past 22 years, and carbon emissions are going down in some of the richest nations, including the UK and the US. But this is not happening fast enough. A central element of the Paris Agreement is that richer nations need to lead decarbonization efforts, to give lower income nations more time to transition away from fossil fuels. Despite some claims to the contrary, the global energy transition is not in full swing. In fact, it hasn't actually begun, because the transition demands a reduction in fossil fuel use. Instead, it continues to increase year on year. And so policymakers are turning to overshoot in an attempt to claim that they now have a plan to avoid dangerous climate change. A central plank of this approach is that climate system in the future will continue to function as it does today. This is a reckless assumption. At the start of 2023, Berkeley Earth, NASA, the UK Met Office, and Carbon Brief predicted that 2023 would be slightly warmer than the previous year, but unlikely to set any records. 12 months later, and all four organizations concluded that 2023 was by some distance the warmest year ever recorded. In fact, between February 2023 and February 2024, the global average temperature warming exceeded the Paris target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The extreme weather events of 2023 give us a glimpse of the suffering that further global warming will produce. A 2024 report from the World Economic Forum concluded that by 2050, climate change may have caused over 14 million deaths and 12.5 trillion in loss and damages. Currently, we cannot fully explain why global temperatures have been so high for the past 18 months. Changes in dust, soot, and other aerosols are important, and there are natural processes such as El Niño that will be having an effect. But it appears there is still something missing in our current understanding of how the climate is responding to human impacts. This includes changes in the Earth's vital natural carbon cycle. Around half of all the carbon dioxide humans have put into the atmosphere over the whole of human history has gone into carbon sinks on land and oceans. We get this carbon removal for free, and without it, warming would be much higher. Carbon dioxide from the air dissolves in the oceans, making them more acidic, which threatens marine ecosystems. At the same time, increasing carbon dioxide promotes the growth of plants and trees, which locks up carbon in their leaves, roots, and trunks. All climate policies and scenarios assume that these natural carbon sinks will continue to remove tens of billions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere each year. There is evidence that land-based carbon sinks, such as forest, remove significantly less carbon in 2023. If natural sinks begin to fail, something they may well do in a warmer world, then the task of lowering global temperatures becomes even harder. The only credible way of limiting warming to any amount is to stop putting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in the first place. Science fiction solutions. It's clear that the commitments countries have made to date as part of the Paris Agreement will not keep humanity safe, while carbon emissions and temperatures continue to break records. Indeed, proposing to spend trillions of dollars over this century to suck carbon dioxide out of the air, or the myriad other ways to hack the climate, is an acknowledgement that the world's largest polluters are not going to curb the burning of fossil fuels. Direct air capture, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, enhanced ocean alkalinity, biochar, sulfate aerosol injection, cirrus cloud thinning. The entire wacky races of carbon dioxide removal and geoengineering only make sense in a world of failed climate policy. Over the following years, we are going to see climate impacts increase. Lethal heat waves are going to become more common. Storms and floods are going to become increasingly destructive. More people are going to be displaced from their homes. National and regional harvests will fail. Vast sums of money will need to be spent on efforts to adapt to climate change, and perhaps even more compensating those who are most affected. We are expected to believe that while all this and more unfolds, new technologies that will directly modify the Earth's atmosphere and energy balance will be successfully deployed. What's more, some of these technologies may need to operate for 300 years in order for the consequences of overshoot to be avoided. Rather than quickly slow down carbon-polluting activities and increasing the chances that the Earth system will recover, we are instead going all in on net zero and overshoot in an increasingly desperate hope that untested science fiction solutions will save us from climate breakdown. We can see the cliff edge rapidly approaching. Rather than slam on our brakes, some people are instead pushing their foot down harder on the accelerator. Their justification for this insanity is that we need to go faster in order to be able to make the jump and land safely on the other side. We believe that many who advocate for carbon dioxide removal and geoengineering do so in good faith, but they include proposals to refreeze the Arctic by pumping up seawater into the ice sheets to form new layers of ice and snow. These are interesting ideas to research, but there is very little evidence this will have any effect on the Arctic, let alone global climate. These are the sorts of knots that people tie themselves up in when they acknowledge the failure of climate policy, but refuse to challenge the fundamental forces behind such failure. They are unwittingly slowing down the only effective action of rapidly phasing out fossil fuels. I just want to interject something here and point out, we live in a country that says that we can't eliminate homelessness because it's too difficult. You think these guys are going to solve climate change through a technical solution? It's just an embarrassing way to think about the world. That's because proposals... I just cannot take this shit seriously anymore. Like, we live in a society of total fucking dimwits. It's just so fucking obvious. The bottom line here is that the climate system is utterly indifferent to our pledges and promises. It doesn't care about economic growth. And if we carry on burning fossil fuels, then it will not stop changing until the energy balance is restored, by which time millions of people could be dead, with many more facing intolerable suffering. Even if we assume that carbon removal and even geoengineering technologies can be deployed in time, there's a very large problem with the plan to overshoot 1.5 degrees Celsius and then lower temperatures later. Tipping points. The science of tipping points is rapidly advancing. Late last year, one of us, James Dyke, along with over 200 academics from around the world, was involved in the production of the Global Tipping Points Report. This was a review of the latest science about where tipping points in the climate system may be, as well as exploring how social systems can undertake rapid change in the direction we want, thereby producing positive tipping points. Within the report's 350 pages is abundant evidence that the overshoot approach is an extraordinarily dangerous gamble with the future of humanity. Some tipping points have the potential to cause global havoc. Yep, Zummerman gets it. The science of tipping points advancing because they are being crossed. Yeah. The melt of permafrost could release billions of tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere and supercharged human-caused climate change. Yeah, you know what? Like, Nilo, I get you, man. Like, Nilo's just put up, like, a guy sleeping, basically. And it's just like... Yeah, here we go. And the final... The time for action is now. Like, we know. Like, we know. Like, what's it going to take, do you think? Like, what is it actually going to take, do you think? Before people actually, like, revolt and riot and do something. Because this is just, like... Like, what we're experiencing is, like, a literal insanity, right? Right? Zummerman says the desire for a reductionist understanding of all is what's killing us. No, I think we're just addicted to superpowers. That's all. That fundamentally, like, walk outside your door, look at your street. What do you see? Cars, right? You see everybody driving around in cars. And fundamentally, if we want to confront this issue, like, one of the easiest things that we could do is to just say to everybody, stop driving. Just quit driving. Quit it. Too bad. Tough. We'll send a bus around, right? We'll do some mass transit, right? We'll do some mass transit. But like, we're not going to do that, right? Literally shut down the gas stations. Straight up. Just shut them down and just be like, it's over, right? And then everybody will be like, oh, I can't get to my job, though. What about my job? Yeah, okay. We'll send a vehicle around. We'll send around a truck to make sure that everybody gets access to food, right? We'll ensure that everybody's eating. We'll make sure that everybody's got that kind of connection. But, like, shut it down, right? But that would require a spine, right? And that would require people in positions of power to actually, like... I am of the opinion that until the fossil fuel executives and the people who are at the top of the fossil fuel industry, including their bankers that are enabling them, are in prison. I don't mean charged with fines. I don't mean going to trial. I don't mean talking to the Congress. I don't mean any of that. I mean in jail. Then we're not serious. We're desperately unserious about this issue. Because these people are obviously fraudulent liars who have obviously peddled a grift on us. Very nakedly and very obviously. Yeah. CH, overshoot as in opening your parachute 30 seconds after hitting the ground. Exactly. And I don't know, guys. Like, I know it's like doom and gloomy and all that kind of stuff, but I just don't care anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know I read a lot of that article, but it's just like, I just don't really care anymore. Like, we're not going to do anything about it. That's obvious. We're not interested. We're not going to do like a big mass movement. We're not going to do a big protest. If we did do a protest, the military would shut it down, right? Like, we're not actually going to do anything about it. So I just don't. I think that we should just disconnect from the outcome at this point. Like, for me, it's just focus on living your own life, right? Just like enjoy the grass, enjoy the trees, enjoy the beach. Like, just enjoy that shit. Stop working so much. Work less. Get disconnected from this shit. Tell people that the reason why you're not working so much or the reason why you're not focusing so much is because climate change is like it's finishing us, right? Well, CH, here's the thing. People have heard me talk about this a lot on this channel, right? It's nothing new. The Earth is going to be completely fine, right? The Earth is a regenerative system. The Earth regenerates itself. How do we know? Because it created all this in the first place, right? Like, it didn't build the buildings, but the forests, the grasslands, the prairies, right? The deserts, right? All the ecosystem that we live in, right? It created us it spawned us. It created us, right? Like, we're all walking around pretending like we have mastery of this place, and we don't. Right, we're just babies. We're not very intelligent. Like, I'd put us as like a species at like the intelligence of a 2-year-old, essentially, as like in totality. That we found a toy and we don't know how to stop playing with the toy, and it's going to kill us. It's going to destroy us. Right, like, we're the ones that are going to get completely fucked over. We're the ones that are going to eat it. Right, and the Earth is going to just regenerate. Right? And how do we know? Because it's done it before, and it can do it again. It's completely fine, right? Maybe it'll go into like an ice age, right? Maybe it'll go into like a hot desert setting, but it'll regenerate itself. It'll always do that, right? Because that's what it is, and that's what it does. We've seen it do it before. Right? We know it's done it, and so the grief that we have is not actually for the Earth, right? The grief that we have is not for the Earth. And the grief that we have is not really for us. It's not really for me. Like, I'm not going to experience the worst possible outcomes. And if I do, it's going to happen like right at the end of my life. Right? The grief, right? The grief that we have is for the conception of humanity itself. That we have this image, and we have this vision, and we have this view of humanity that exists in work like Star Trek, or even Star Wars for that matter. We have this conception, there's this perception, there's this vision, this idea of humanity that we have, that we can become a spacefaring people. We can ascend beyond Earth's boundaries, and we can begin to gain mastery of our solar system. We can become a widespread people, and we can learn more and grow more and achieve more, right? That inside of us there is this inherent draw towards knowledge and knowing more and learning more, because we are an expression of the universe, and the universe wants to know more about itself. It's trying to do that, right? And we are here to achieve that, and we want to do it, right? And so when something like climate change happens, that is an existential threat to humanity, that has the potential to wipe us out in big and significant ways, we grieve that, because we come to realize that we are an evolutionary dead end. And the universe grieves that, because there is hope in the human spirit that we will be, that the universe spawns us and goes, oh, there it is. Here it is. We've done it. We've spawned the voice of the universe. We've spawned the eyes and ears of the universe. And it's going to go, and it's going to learn, it's going to grow, and it's going to evolve, and it's going to change. And it's going to manifest the universe into itself and have an enlightened understanding of itself within itself. Right? That the universe exists within itself and without of itself. And so the universe will understand that it is within and without of itself. And humanity will be able to manifest itself in that way. And that's the joy of creation. That's the joy of growth. That's the joy of discovery and of research and of building knowledge and of refutation and of debate, to find something that hews closer to what is real, so that we can manifest reality into itself and then be reality in reality. That is the goal of all creatures and of all species, and we are at the forefront of it. The fact that we even have the ability to articulate that is something that we are doing shows that we are at the forefront of that idea, and we grieve the loss of that. And the universe grieves the loss of that. That the universe, it like when you play like a video game, right? And you think things are going well, and you spend all your time on this, and then suddenly you hit a wall, and you go, oh shit, I made a big mistake 2 hours ago, and all of this is for nothing. All this is for naught. The whole thing is lost. Oh, fuck. Right? And so humanity is just an evolutionary dead end. There's something wrong with us. There's just something where we can't seem to overcome. See, it seems as though there are individuals within the body human that can and get to that place of like, hey, maybe we shouldn't commit mass suicide, right? Maybe we shouldn't do that. But as an entity, as a whole, as a zeitgeist consciousness, we just don't have it. We're not there. And so the question in my mind isn't, are we going to stop climate change? Because we're obviously disinterested in that. Like we clearly do not care about that. We care more about our God, money, than we care about that at all, right? The question is, how many people are going to survive, and what are the living conditions for humanity going to be? And that the sadness that we feel for ourselves, is that instead of being able to pursue the universal objective, right, manifesting reality into reality, instead of pursuing that that intrinsic truth that exists in all of us, we're going to follow a survivalist line, right? That we're going to follow just the line of survival, trying to find any amount of enjoyment within that survival, trying to discover who we are and what we are, trying to find any kind of love or compassion for our environment, manifesting the truth, capturing that sense of discovery, and then connecting to our creator, right? So we're going back to square one. And that's the grief. That we've been following a line for a long time that we thought was going to do something cool. And we thought, and is doing something cool. Like, let's be straight. Superpowers are cool, right? What we're doing right now is kind of cool. There's something cool about it. We have all these superpowers, right? We can fly, right? We can fly. We can travel long distances at extreme speeds. We can communicate anywhere around the world instantaneously. Like, these are superpowers, man. Like, this is stuff that, like, even 300 years ago, people would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? It used to take, like, a 6-week journey to get across, a 6-month journey to get across the ocean. Now it takes you a day, and we complain about it. Like, we have superpowers, for sure we do. And so we've been following this line, right? We've been following this line for a long time. But this line is reaching a dead end, right? Because this line isn't actually the genuine line. We're just caught in amusing ourselves. Because fundamentally that's what we're doing. We're just amusing ourselves to death. We're caught in the survivalist line while trying to amuse ourselves. But we despise ourselves and everybody around us. Clearly, we have no sense of self-awareness. We don't even try to have a sense of self-awareness. And because we've grabbed hold of this false god, right? We're not trying to manifest reality into reality. We're just trying to accumulate as many god bucks as we can. Right? We're just trying to get as much favor from God as we possibly can, from the God of money that we possibly can. And that's the objective. Well, that's a dead end. That's a false God. There's no salvation there. And so we're going to go back to square one. And the only question that we are going to see answered is, how bad will the devastation be? Like, how bad will it be? And hopefully, right, hopefully there'll be enough survivors and enough people so that we will kind of come to an understanding that, like, oh yeah, like the earth can completely fuck us over. The earth can completely fuck us over. These ecosystems that we live in are extremely fragile, right? And the threat is real, and the threat is significant. And if we don't play ball, we'll get hit in the balls. Like, and it's so clear that every aspect of the earth is maneuvering itself and working itself in order to diminish us, right? Like, I take a look at the plastic in our bodies and in our brains and all this kind of stuff, and it's clearly the universe just being like, oh, you like plastic, eh? Here's some plastic. Here's some plastic for you. What do you think about this plastic? And our fertility rates are plummeting. Our every aspect is diminishing. Humanity is in diminishment, right? Yeah, I got plastic in my balls, says Isaac. Exactly. Joe writes, a flawed species to say the least, such potential is being wasted. Nilo writes, the Earth, the Sun, meteors, etc. Plenty of things that can wreak us havoc. Yeah, but this one's we're doing ourselves, right? We're doing this one to ourselves, and that's and it's because fundamentally we don't acknowledge that there are rules that we have to follow, right? The people who are leading us are obviously demented. They are psychopaths. They don't think that the rules should apply to them, right? Nor do they really acknowledge that there are rules. Like, you take a look at a hack like Peter Thiel, and he's basically a climate change denialist. And so he's funding the Republicans because all he really cares about is money and pursuing his path of immortality. Like, literally the guy is on record being like, well, the elves in Lord of the Rings are immortal, so why can't we also be immortal? Like, the guy's a total loser. Well, and the system of capital itself, like Joe writes, that's exactly it. They don't acknowledge limits of any kind. Like, the system of capital itself is a system of infinite growth, right? Like, that's one of its fundamental beliefs, is the idea of infinite growth, which comes from the worship of money and the worship of the self, right? Because the only thing that matters is you, right? So you shouldn't have any limits. You should be experiencing freedom, right? And so it's this total perversion of what it is to be a human and what it is to experience reality. It's supplanting the actual spiritual journey of the discovery of the self in a serious way with the idea that the self is already perfect and doesn't need to be discovered, right? You don't need to discover anything about yourself because you're already perfect. And what's the proof of that? Oh, I have $1 billion, so I'm already perfect, right? That the chaos god bestowed me with billions of dollars, and so I'm a perfect person, and I don't need to do self-analysis. And you just see it in the collapsing personas of people like Elon Musk, right? Like, Elon Musk is straight up in collapse as a person, and he's doing it in public for everyone to see, right? And his own family is turning against him, and everything that is close and near and dear to him is just in this total state of decay. Every project that he's involved with is just absolutely turning on him. He's not developing anything that has actual outcomes that are positive. Like, and there are many manifestations of it that are very embarrassing. Like the Cybertruck, for example. The Cybertruck is a fucking embarrassment just by looking at it. You just look at the thing and you're just like, what the fuck? How did anybody think that this is a thing that should be taken seriously? Zummerman writes, the world has been hotter at points in history. Life will adapt. The question is which part of its will. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with that assessment. Like, I do think that there's an unlikeliness that all of humanity will be wiped out. But I mean, it sort of depends, right? Like, if the temperature goes up to 100 degrees Celsius, tough. We're fucked. Like, it's over, right? CH writes, no chance at all that Homo sapiens in the mix after the overshoot. There's a lot of genes that won't be making it through that filter. Pretty sure pterodactyls had great potential too, as did about 8 other genus Homo species that died out. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, I laugh every time I see it on the road. Every time you see what, Peanut Butter Beatrice, on the road? But it's just like... So I don't know. I'm no longer invested in the success of humanity. I just don't think that that's something that humanity is actually interested in. Like, I don't think that humanity is interested in its own success. I think that there are pieces of humanity that are interested in success, right? I think that there are parts of it that are, but the Western world certainly is not. Like the Western world is interested in supremacy. That the supremacist worldview and the supremacist it's like that quote from Lucifer in John Milton's Paradise Lost, that it is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. That's basically the position of the West. That if the West needs to turn this place into a nuclear wasteland in order to govern it, then it will. In order to be thought of as the number one supreme king of all things, then it will. It will do that. Peanut Butter Beatrice, Musk's, oh yeah, newly minted toy cars. Yeah. My favorite is that, like, people will get these things or get close to these things, and they'll basically go over them and point out all the flaws. They'll be like, look how big this gap is. There's, like, watertight, like, somebody took a hose and was, like, spraying one down, and the inside of the vehicle just got drenched because all the water went into the vehicle. Eggs D writes, we're an evolutionary dead end because we weren't strong enough to defeat capitalism, eh? Well, when, like, it's ourselves. It's us, right? Like, we're the ones that are generating capitalism. We're the ones that are generating the religious ideology of capitalism, right? Like, capitalism is not an external force, right? We generate it. It is of us. That's why it's changeable. Right? That's why we can change it. And it is possible to change, right? It is possible to do, but it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a simple thing. Like, people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel in this are not going to have a come to Jesus moment. They're not going to have a moment of like, oh my goodness, we got to do, oh my God. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, they're fine with this plane of reality becoming a hellscape. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them at all. They don't. Like, take a look at how Elon Musk talks about his own kids. He does not care about his own children at all. Even a tiny, tiny little bit, right? And people like Peter Thiel and Warren Buffett and Jeff Bezos are all the same. They don't give a fuck about their own children. So what makes you think they care about the concept of humanity? They don't. And so the earth is going to put us in a position where money is not going to matter. Right? Where people are going to, like, not care about the money out of a total state of desperation. Like, when World War II happened, like, the ruling class was like, okay, we got to stop dealing with this money. We got to stop dealing. We have to have ration cards. We have to actually make sure that everybody's got food. We got to actually make sure everybody's got shelter. We got to actually arrange things so that like, we're in an emergency, and so we actually got to do that, right? So the money matters not so much. Let's go, right? And the state of crisis that we're going to be put in as a species is going to be very similar, and a similar thing is going to happen. That we're all going to simultaneously live in a world where money is not going to matter so much. Because money doesn't actually matter. It's not a real thing. It's a god that we uphold. Right? We uphold the god. And we would be better off without it. But that's going to require a hard lesson. And I think humanity is going to learn that hard lesson. And so I just don't have any grief left. I'm just at acceptance. You know what I mean? Like, if the path is denial, I forget what the exact path is, but it's like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I think that's the line, right? Maybe I've got a couple of them muddled up, but I'm just not angry about it anymore. I'm definitely not bargaining. I'm not going to be depressed about it. I just don't have time for this anymore. I just don't have it in me anymore. Like, I'm just going to not be grieving for humanity anymore as it shoots itself in the foot continuously. So I'm just here to kind of point at it in the hopes that somebody else is going to pick up that ball and be like, holy fuck. Yo, humanity. What's up? You're actually going to try? Like, you actually going to give a shit? And the funniest part about it, in my view, right? And it's hilarious. The funniest part about it is that the very people that talk the biggest game about personal responsibility are the worst offenders. Like, by a lot. Like a guy like Jordan Peterson, for example. Right? Here's a guy whose like whole shtick is telling people to clean up their rooms and do all this kind of stuff. He's a climate change denialist. He's a clown. Right? And so there's just so much projection in the conversation, and I'm just over it. Like it's like the school shooting thing. Like, why don't I report on school shootings? Because it's just, we're not going to do anything about it, and we know we're not going to do anything about it, right? So why bother with it? Why spend any amount of time on it? Right? Someone's going to get shot, and we're going to go, and then move on with our lives. Well, same thing is going to happen with climate change. Heat wave killed 1,000 people in this place. Okay, cool. Yeah, we know. Moving on. Right? And like eventually the people who are actually responsible for all of this are going to be dead. Right? Like the Darren Woods of the world, right? The Jordan Petersons of the world. The climate change denialists and the people who were funding like ExxonMobil and all these guys, like they're just going to be dead, right? Time will move such that they will die, right? And we should celebrate their passing because it's always good to see Nazis go. But like, and so what we should be doing is just organizing ourselves to just be ready for it. And be aware of it, and be not so overwhelmed by it as it's happening. Right? Because there's going to be a lot of people that are just going to be overwhelmed by it. Right? They're just going to be overwhelmed by it. Well, okay. Enjoy living that life, I guess. Right? And of course, if people I know die of like heat exhaustion or in a flood or something, it'll be tragic and it'll be sad, of course. But this is just what it is now. Like, this is just what it is. And we're just not interested. Like, if we were interested, we'd be parking the war machines. Right? If we were interested, we'd be basically saying, hey, the United States Navy should probably get into port. If we were interested, we should probably be like, hey, this whole system of globalization, this whole idea that we're sending boats all over the planet, maybe not, man. Like, maybe we should make our own shit. Right? Hey, maybe just leave the oil in the ground. Yeah, turn off the gas pump. Just turn it off. But we're just a fundamentally unserious people who are entranced and addicted to superpowers. And we're not going to do anything about that. Yeah. Joe writes, it's a tough pill to swallow, but that is the trajectory we're on. Yeah. So my encouragement, and I know it's not easy. Like, I'm not going to pretend like, yeah, just do it. Just go get a job. You know? Like that kind of bullshit. But that is the path that we have to put ourselves on. Like, we're not going to stop it. Right? Like, unless all of the sudden the zeitgeist picks up and there's millions, literally millions, of people in the streets surrounding the halls of power, demanding an end to it. Right? Like, literally at this stage in the game, it's going to take, like, groups of people just grabbing the ExxonMobil executives themselves. Because we know the military and the police are not going to do it. Right? Like, that's what it is going to take. And it's not going to happen. Right? So, we have to just get ourselves into the mindset that, okay, like, this is the reality, this is the trajectory, this is what we should expect, and this is what we should see, and to make decisions accordingly. Eggs D says, man, we used to make our own shit for real. Remember when we had local blacksmiths? Local blacksmiths. Well, I think I'm going to end this one a little early, guys. It's kind of a downbeat, I suppose. But at the same time, I got to tell you, here's the positive notes. Here's the stuff that I'm really looking forward to, okay? We are in a moment right now where we're getting lots and lots of articles that are just like laying it out. I just read one that are just laying it out, and everything looks grim and all of that, okay? Well, we are going to live in a reality where all of these climate change denialists, all of these assholes are going to be gone. Or at the least, silenced. Because reality will show very plainly that we were right. That what we were saying was correct. And that we were just ahead of the curve. We were the ones pointing at it saying like, hey, think we should do something about that? Hey. No? Okay. But the reality is, and maybe we will be surprised, and it's for this reason, and to me this is something hopeful and something for us to look forward to. We're going to live in a world where the boomers are dead. We're going to live in a world where a lot of these fraudulent losers are dead. We're going to live in a world where no one, like the people who are saying that climate change doesn't exist will be a fringe minority. Like just kooky losers and oddballs. And you're going to be able to say things about climate change and talk about climate change openly and honestly. And no one's going to think ill of you or roll their eyes or sneer or think you're dumb. And if they do, then you're going to be able to be like, okay, creepy weirdo. And that's the way it's going to go. But in all cases, guys, always remember, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.